Leer. Wildside.
Welcome to episode number 1 of Chip Leer's Wildside podcast. I cannot be more excited to get a new project off the ground than I am of this podcast one right now. And what a way to kick this project off than one of my all-time favorite human beings, John Hoyer, the professional walleye angler, sitting down, and we had a great talk, and I know that you're going to enjoy it. John's a 2-time National Walleye Tour champion. He's a Muskie champion. I don't know how many different species of fish that he has competed for and won, but we're going to learn a lot about what makes John tick today, how he thinks today. He's recently given up a 20-year career as a union carpenter and put it all into becoming a professional angler, and he did it in grand fashion in 2019. He is not looking back. So sit back, enjoy, and chill out and listen to one of the hottest anglers in North America this year, John Hoyer. John Hoyer, you are it. You are the first guest on Chip Leer's Wildside podcast. Welcome.
Thank you. I feel more honored than, I don't know, maybe anything else that's happened to me in life.
Well, I think it was, one, you were available.
Yep.
And 2, you're very patient. And there might be some patience needed to get through this. But glad to have you here. Welcome aboard. And let's get to know John Hoyer a little bit. I mean, we're coming off 2019, where 5 words really kind of changed everything. And lucky you got to hear him a couple times. John Hoyer, National Walleye Tour champion.
That was probably, those were the first time I heard them and the second time I heard those words. And man, they don't get old when you say that to me on the stage. That's what dreams are made of.
Well, plus you get to hoist some pretty big checks. And that second one, 97,000 something, man.
Yeah, that's a nice, I don't know if it's going to be in the garage or in my living room, but, you know, as friends come over and see that big cardboard thing.
I'd keep it right in your back pocket.
Well, it fits in the back of my truck, but they don't take those at restaurants, so we found that out.
So, but a lot has gone into this last year. You win 2 tournaments. You recently left your full-time gig to go become a full-time professional angler, and that is no easy road to hoe. So let's back up from there and give me a little idea. Where did you grow up? Where did you come from?
Actually, just down the road in Brainerd, Minnesota, and so that's where I was born. And then when I was 4, my family moved to Calgary, Alberta. And then when I was like 13, we moved back to Litchfield, Minnesota. So back to West Central Minnesota. And then I've lived, ever since I graduated high school. I went to NDSU for 2 years, and then I've lived in the Minneapolis area since then.
So what made the travels? What brought you around? Was this work?
No, my dad, being a Lutheran pastor, is why, we got to experience Canada for 10 years. Started in Brainerd. His first call was there. And then that's also why they ditched me basically when I was, 18, graduating high school, because they got a call down to Florida, which is where a lot of my other family, ended up. So that's what got our family to move around, and how I got to experience like the melting pot at Calgary, and really kind of the culture growing up that I have experienced. And other than that, I mean, the reason why I settled down in the cities is because of the job that I've been worked for 20 years as a union carpenter. And the reason why I settled on the west side of the cities on Lake Minnetonka is because, and that honestly, that's a world-class lake for a lot of different species.
But this is your dad. This is referred to as Pastor Phil. Is that right?
Oh yeah, for sure.
So tell me about Pastor Phil. I know I looked up and I found a photo of Pastor Phil right here.
Yeah,
so that's you and your dad right there.
Yeah, that's him.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, he Pastor Phil is pretty legendary. He as a Lutheran pastor, I grew up very, very conservative, and it's kind of funny, meeting other pastors' kids at conventions or whatever. we were kind of hellions. And I mean, there's been books written about it. It's like, it's pastor's kid syndrome. Like, you're naturally rebelling and going and venturing on your own. That's just because you're told the right way to do things. So then just by human nature, you're going to kind of test your boundaries and everything. So until my adult life, I never really appreciated like that moral fabric that was bestowed on me. You take it for granted until you start meeting more and more people in the world and realize that not everybody had that opportunity to really set out what right and wrong is, where your priorities should lie in life, how to interact with people, how to respect people, just all those like normal things. It's kind of interesting, not to sound negative, but not everybody got that awesome upbringing, growing up. So it took me till, probably my mid-20s to really appreciate that. But looking back, I mean, it's a crazy blessing.
So how far did you push it? When you said you rebelled, what kind of rebellion
I
were
don't
you?
know.
I mean, like fun rebel, or were you a serious rebellion? Because myself, I only go on this because myself, I was the extreme. I was all sorts of challenges for my family, and for lots of different reasons. But
yeah, I mean, I feel like the timing of is really good because I know that some of the members of my dad's church are going to want to listen to this podcast because they're all big fans of you and they like to follow my fishing career. But my dad recently retired last year from the ministry. So, I mean, as far as rebelling, not being home on time, we probably started drinking beer before we were 21 in high school. I missed a couple games my senior year of baseball because somebody called in the party that we were at, stuff like that. Normal stuff. Not like the, there every day in church, every day Bible class, like what somebody would perceive a pastor's kids to be. Like we were normal kids doing kid stuff for sure.
So it's got to be a unique family dynamic to grow up there. You're kind of a public family, right? I mean, because you getting viewed in the community, and you're kind of probably held, or not kind of probably, you are held to a higher standard, kind of. Is that right?
Yeah, for sure. And that was one of the reasons why my mom and dad and the rest of our family, or my sister also ended up moving, but why we left Litchfield. It was kind of funny, little known fact. The editor of the newspaper, when I was playing football or whatever, wrote an editorial part, and his editorial was when it was okay to swear. And he told the story about a receiver on the football team whose dad happened to be a pastor in the community, and how he dropped a touchdown pass being wide open and said the S word, and the guy happened to be there taking photos and heard that kid say the S word. And he went on to talk about, when swearing was okay. And my mom, I remember she read that, she was like, "Are you kidding me? Like, how would somebody ever write this?" And it was coming from Calgary, the crazy metropolis that Calgary is, and then going back to small town USA and seeing that in print, was really kind of funny. But definitely a public figure, public family. And but I mean, the beauty of that too is like all the people that we were just forced to talk to, and socialize with. So it's cool that I don't know how I got so outgoing or talkative with people, but that was all part of it, obviously.
Well, and I think that's why they invented the internet, so you can say whatever you want to say when you want to say it.
Right, for sure.
There seems to be a lot of that. You said conservative family. What type of Lutheran pastor? Because my understanding, there's a lot of, I don't know how many different types of sects there would be.
Yeah.
Is that how you describe that?
Yep. Yeah. So he's Wisconsin Evangelical Lutheran Synod, so Wells Synod. I would say that the Wells Synod, like their beliefs are literally the most like conservative, where, there's a lot of other, Missouri Synod, et cetera, that, they've have female pastors and stuff, where like the Wells Synod is, really kind of how Lutheranism started.
Okay. So a little different than that. What's her name? The Nadia Bolts?
Yeah.
Yeah. Tends to be a little bit far on the other side.
Right. For sure.
Yeah. Very good. Okay. So that's pretty neat. So are you still are you still fairly spiritual? Are you a religious person because of your upbringing, and how does that, where you stand there?
Yeah, for sure.
Because I could see people growing up in a household that told you to do that could go completely the other way.
Right. And, I've never left that, like you said, like spirituality. I admit I don't go to church on a weekly basis. A lot of that was kind of from my fishing schedule I forced upon myself, working 5 days a week, weekend warrior, fishing right till sunset, every Sunday, and, not prioritizing church like that. But, always has always been in the forefront of my brain, like, in times of, trouble, who to turn for, what to pray for, et cetera, like that. So yeah, that's a constant in my life, and it always has been for sure.
No wavering ever?
Well, no wavering from the, like, who I'm asking, for forgiveness, or who I'm asking for, insight. That no wavering in that. But
so where do you end up in your family? You got brothers, you got sisters, right? One of each?
Yep. So I'm the middle child, and I have a brother. Is that a
whole another list of issues?
I think so, because that's been brought to my attention too. That's like a standard character issue. That's a standard personality, and you must be a middle child. I'm like, oh yeah, you're right. So I don't know all the science behind that, but I'd say I'm a normal middle child. But yeah, so I have an older brother. He's 2 years older, and then a sister who's 2 years younger.
And then are they married? Kids?
Yeah, Drew and Jen are married. They just moved back to Minnesota, so they live in the east side of the cities. And then Elizabeth and Nick are married, and they have a niece and a nephew, Ava and Andrew, and they live in Florida by my parents.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Tight family?
Yeah, for sure.
Still.
Right, yeah.
So you guys, and I know that you took some time, went down there and down to Florida, spent the holidays with the family, right? Everybody gets together?
Yep, yeah. The Drew and Jen part of it, and there's always it seems like people are switching off who they hang out with for Christmas or Easter or Thanksgiving, but this year we had everybody down there for Christmas, and it's always a riot with good food and a lot of sarcasm.
That's all good.
Yeah.
So moving around, did you have a lot of friends growing up that way? I mean, how did you end up getting introduced to fishing? That's kind of where I'm trying to figure out there. Where that connection came from growing up.
Yeah, and actually, when my dad brought me back to the airport on January 2nd this year, he was going over, the people that taught him walleye fishing in Brainerd, Minnesota. And it's funny, at first when I started fishing the professional side, my dad wanted to be like, yep, taught you everything good luck. I was like, yeah. So now, especially the last couple of years, it's funny to make fun of him and say, yeah, you taught me that walleyes are the most finicky eaters ever, and you have to use 6-pound test on a Lindy rig, and that everything has to be super subtle, right? That's what you taught me, and that was completely wrong, actually. You wasted a lot of time in my life. So, of course, sarcasm. But so he went back to telling me about the guys that taught him walleye fishing in Brainerd, Minnesota, and I actually drive by the little resort. It's right across from Hole in the Day Lake, so on the very north end where the cabin stop. So that was the Anderslands cabin, and it was a cabin that was 14 by 14. Those are some of my earliest memories of being at a lake and going out in a boat was there. And then, so that was Selmer Andersland, who was a member of my dad's church, and then a guy named Ray Bama, who was a guide in the area. I think back in the era where the Linders were guiding in the Brainerd Lakes area. And he's the one who taught my dad, how to walleye fish. And it's cool. He told me, all right, Hoyer, 6 a.m., Gull Lake boat launch, be there. And he was this really kind of militaristic type guy, but he's the guy who taught my dad how to read the electronics, what fish look like, and how to Lindy rig. And then, from there you're asking about how the friends I had and stuff. It's always that church connection, because once the pastor rolls in, you got hunting rights, you got best fishing spots, So it's when we moved to Calgary, it was instant, we're in Canada, where can we find walleye fishing? But in reality, from Calgary, most of the best walleye fishing was a 3-hour drive north, up by Edmonton. So that was the first time I remember catching a limit of walleyes. Buck Lake was one of them. And, starting to really get excited about fishing.
That's cool.
Mm-hmm.
So what, then how do you transfer? I mean, fast forward here. So we get out of school, and then we evolved into, you left, went away to school?
Yeah, for college, I went to NDSU for 2 years. And then I joke with my friends and I say, then I gave up on being a civil engineer and wanted to pursue my lifelong goal of becoming a union carpenter. So, I mean, what actually happened was, I was doing carpentry in the summer, and then inevitably I wanted to take a year off to make, more money and set aside. And it was like a cliche scenario where, by then I was getting a union carpenter's wage, which, was like $26 an hour. And then I thought about how I could afford a Ranger boat payment. So, sometime in the end of that year in the fall, or it was about, I guess it would be, so maybe around into the spring when it was time to start thinking about going back to school again like I planned, then I bought a 618 tiller Ranger boat, and, I guess the rest is history as far as, school. And I always kind of had a little bit of remorse when I watched my friends started getting these engineering jobs and everything. But in hindsight, the divine intervention part of that is like, there's no way I could take off as much time as I ended up taking off in my carpentry job if I was in an engineering position, like as far as months and months off, like 4 or 5 months off of work to pursue, where I'm at today or whatever.
So do you fish a lot with your brothers and sister?
No, that's the funny thing. So Drew and Jen just moved back, and they were in this whole, get things back settled, buy a house and everything this whole year. Drew and I did not fish once this year. And that's one of the top things on my list is to like get him and Jen out in my boat. They have a cabin in Wisconsin. I visit there with my Ranger. It's a potato lake. It's a small lake. You can barely get her up to 59 or 60 because you'll run out of real estate. But so since our childhood, our high school, I haven't had my brother out like on the Great Lakes or anything like that. But there's big plans for that this year. Really kind of share all that fun of fishing with them.
But there's another element to your family here too. Your mom, right? She's a pretty key role in this. You talk about your dad getting transferred around, but she's been pretty influential.
Yeah, for sure. The pastor's wife, that's a whole nother book-worthy, novel you can write. And kind of the same thing, where it would get annoying hearing what's right and what's wrong when you're younger. And then you look back and it's like, wow, what a blessing, to have those people in your life and like what they actually were doing for you when you were younger, like giving those ideas. But, the one thing that has never changed is like that positive attitude of my family. And they've just inevitably taught us all that. Like there's no one in my family who would over process something in a negative manner. Like you're always just looking for what's the silver lining here. So yeah, a lot of that is definitely thanks to my mom and how she handles things in life.
Now, your mom has had some medical challenges here, like in the last year or so, if I remember correctly. So, can we talk about that?
Yeah, I think so. I don't see why not. For sure. I mean, it's definitely another thing that's really affected our family. And
what's going on with Mom?
So I guess it'd be about a year and a half ago now. She found out she had a tumor in her brain. And it ended up being a cancerous tumor, and it was in the area of her midterm memory. And it was interesting that they chose Jacksonville. Then fast forward 20 some years, they live like a mile away from the Mayo Clinic in Jacksonville. And who would have ever thought that they were a mile away from like the best brain surgeon in the world? So pretty interesting when my mom originally had a little word recall issues and then went in, got the MRI, and you have a tumor and it's cancerous. And I mean, that was just this amazing shock to our family.
What's Mom's name?
Ann.
Ann?
Yeah.
So suddenly Ann can't remember? Is it short-term memory, long-term memory?
Yeah, that midterm, it was just kind of like word recall, like simple words, that they would just kind of have this little lapse in her head and she couldn't really remember them right away. So,
the stuff we stumble on every day.
Right. Yeah. And, the lesson on tumors and brain surgery we got from the Mayo surgeon, was really kind of interesting. The understanding of the fact, like when a tumor is there, it's literally just a mechanical procedure with some very advanced equipment to go in and to remove that tumor. And the only reason why it's causing this area or why it would be deemed operable is, so this one's in this area of this midterm memory, and it's just literally pushing against your brain to the point where it can't function properly. So once they, take that mass out of there, then things are kind of back to normal in that area or whatever, obviously way more advanced than that. But, we all flew down there. We were there when she went into surgery, and those are some amazing emotions. I've never felt them that strong before in my life, as we were sitting there, and they give you these really solid updates. And I don't think at any point anyone thought like she wasn't going to come out of the surgery. Like they had reassured us that this is a very standardized procedure. But when she came out of surgery and we went and saw her and she was like wide awake and it was like nothing had changed at all, I literally walked out of that front door and it was like, I looked up and it was just literally uncontrollable crying, like emotion. And it was, literally the strongest emotional thing I've ever felt in my life. And, it was interesting just to feel your body do that. Never had any other reason to do it in my life.
Well, man, it's love, man.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, full-fledged, nothing, whole hard back, this is it.
Right. And it was like way overwhelming. And it was so cool to walk out to the car and just observe what my body was doing, And, but really that, that silver lining part, inevitably our whole family looks at that and it puts something into perspective. Like you hear the C word, and if it's with a friend or somebody, that is, you feel it from the bottom of your heart, like if it's your friend's mom or something like that. But until it's in your immediate family, for whatever reason, it's not the same, And I think the next level is if you heard that for yourself, And so now it's processing how she feels, and then it's also the big picture thing that I learned and going for the rest of my life is really the most important things in life are simply are you breathing or not? And it's so weird how even just a year and a half ago, my whole schedule, my ups and downs, the emotional roller coaster of tournament fishing, it's all categorized in a very least important, area when you can compare it to what ultimately is the most important thing in life. And I didn't know that. I never would have thought that way, until a year and a half ago with my mom. But I don't know, if there wasn't a reason to be optimistic going forward in everything, now it's amplified for me. Because why, what are we complaining about here? You didn't catch 40 pounds today in a tournament in your Ranger boat with your 250 Evinrude, so it doesn't even register as important now anymore, especially with that, that new benchmark for our family.
That's a big lesson. I lost my dad when I was early 20s, right? Cancer, lung cancer. And I lost him, and it's one of the things that drove me to a life in this industry is because of the fact that I knew that I could. I didn't care. I didn't care about anything other than doing what made me happy inside and what I, received joy from doing with others, and that's the fishing business.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's big stuff, John.
Yeah. It definitely is big stuff, and I think I was down there at their house for 13 days this year, and I don't know if that's a little negativity sneaking in there, but just every day that I get to spend with my mom and my dad, and really get to observe their relationship and how solid it is, and how my dad still is sarcastic to her, and they go back and forth, all that stuff is extra joy, and so maybe all our lifespans aren't necessarily 100 years now. And it really kind of, amplifies, just that time together or whatever.
So what's her prognosis right now?
No new growth on her original big tumor, and then there's this one little area where there's actually a little bit of radiation burn, and that area is swollen up. So they don't biopsy it, because it's in a different area. So instead they'll just observe it. But basically it has swollen like a little tumor, but I think they're confident in saying that that's not what it is. It's just kind of a reaction to the radiation.
Is this the type of thing that she can move on from?
We hope and we pray, yeah, of course.
Yeah.
I would think that if you ask a Mayo Clinic person that, they would say with 100% certainty that, yes, you can move on from this.
Yeah.
I guess at first I didn't really tend to read, all the things that talked about the type of tumor and, because all that stuff's on the internet, and it's a blessing and a curse, a lot of the time. So I guess, we're all optimistic that we get to hang out with Ann for another 15 years, or whatever.
But it's the power of the positive. Tell me about your positive. What comes out of that?
Man, I mean, everything comes out of that for me on a day-to-day basis. The positivity part of, the prayer and all the support, that's a science in itself. They talk about that at the Mayo Clinic, like the people that do survive brain tumors.
No, it's amazing when the more you understand and read, and I know that my brother's had some battles, and the more you understand how important it is to have a good mindset to fight this stuff. It's crazy. Our brains are incredibly tough. I think our brains can do way more than we.
Right, for sure.
We allow them to do.
Yeah, we shut
them down all the time.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I mean, those surgeons and even just the people walking around the Mayo Clinic, they talk about that stuff, like enacting those different, those positive parts of the brain and everything, for sure. But yeah, that's our MO for sure as a family. So, as it does work and how it has worked, even in the last year and a half, that's the pattern. That's the strategy going forward for sure.
All right. Oh, that's big there. So that led off. This happened last fall. Your mom got diagnosed fall of 18.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. And then you head off into 2019. You win 2 walleye tournaments, right?
Yeah.
You're 7th on the Angler of the Year on the National Walleye Tour, I think somewhere, right? Then 7th. Plus you won a Muskie tournament.
Yep. PMTT.
What else did I miss?
Second place at Sault Ste. Marie.
So, okay.
That was my favorite one too.
Was it really?
Yeah. For
that's
sure.
awesome.
Yeah.
And it kicked off. So, oh gosh, now my brain's backing up here a little bit. So fall of 18. What month in the fall? Because you had second place to Courts at the National Walleye Tour, Prairie du Chien. How far into was that summer or was that fall?
That was my second year in the summer.
I'm off a year.
Yep.
Okay, my brain's not working.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very good.
And then last year was my 4th year.
Yeah. So that's big. That's big news. So run me through. So wait a minute. You win at Marinette. You win your very first National Walleye Tour event. I think I got it up here somewhere. I think it was there, right?
Yeah.
Isn't that's about the moment that it's about to take place. And you're sitting here, you're looking at your buddy Corey, and you're about to be crowned champion in that somewhere in the next couple seconds here.
Yeah. Actually, right then I was completely flushed with every fishing memory.
Right at the moment?
I saw him bring two fish over the side of the weigh tank,
Yep.
And I knew I had it. And when he was talking there, I mean, that was actually when he was saying, he was like giving me accolades, and I was literally going through my head, and I think I was doing this subtle little head shaking, like, where am I right now?
Yep.
Corey Sprangle's saying this. I'm on the stage with Chip Leer. Then when you handed me the trophy, oh man, that was like, that was a really cool
18
feeling.
18 pounds of heaven, man.
Yeah, for sure. Is that how heavy they are?
Yeah.
Yeah, they feel like 30, I think, at the end of a tournament. But then, I mean, after that, it's like, it's hard to process that stuff, right immediately. I mean, it's euphoric. Like, you ask me questions, I try and answer them as well as I can, but now it's like realizing when people get caught their tongue and stuff, like I can completely understand how that happens.
Well, plus the hard part about coming off those tournaments is it's a week full of pre-fishing, what people don't understand, right? I mean, you haven't slept hardly all week.
Oh.
You've been on the water from dawn till dusk getting ready, stayed up late, tying, rigging, doing whatever you got to do. Then it's tournament. Then you've got the emotions that all go with it. Maybe a little bit undernourished in the middle of it all.
Oh, yeah.
And then by the time this comes to be, it's all this kind of, you kind of lose it for a second.
Yeah. And the crash after it, I mean, I think when you win, that's a way less of a crash. But in a normal tournament scenario where, you don't cash a check or you don't do as well as you thought, that emotional crash after that, like I've slept 13 hours straight before after that schedule you're just talking about,
When you just get done with the tournament, you just crash.
Yeah, you get home and it's just like, it's the emotional part, And
do you eat during tournaments? Are you is nutrition part of your plan?
Not really during the tournament. I mean, if we're trolling, I will for sure, but it's just like some quick protein and a lot of water. Some of those.
Do you monitor it? I mean, do you say like today I got to have this many grams of protein and this much water, or are you just winging it?
No, I just kind of wing it. Basically, pure protein and some cheese and stuff. Seems to do the trick.
Yeah. So what did you do to win that tournament? Run us through your program.
Oh, at Green Bay?
Yeah.
Well, it was kind of funny. So as my schedule came together, I planned on fishing the Sturgeon Bay Open for the first time. And smallmouth bass, I'm like actually kind of insecure about my fishing ability for bass. I think I've shared that with you before. It's like, man, like they're all right there. Why can't I catch them as well? And I watch a lot of bass fishing, But so as my schedule came together, it's like, all right, in between the Sturgeon Bay Open and the NWT event is Minnesota Walleye Opener, which is a 25-year tradition with friends. So I'm like, how about I talk those guys into coming over to Green Bay to walleye fish? I'll pre-fish a week before the Sturgeon Bay Open. They'll come for a few days. Then there's a few days in between there. I could invite my dad after that, and then so on and so forth. So I ended up being on Green Bay for 23 days, leading up to the tournament out of Marinette. So really, it was like it's my favorite place to fish. And those 23 days, I learned so much, a lot from walleyes, and that was from the smallmouth, and that was simply from how they relate to warm water in the spring. And I always had that in my mind, but watching those bass, in my mind, the picture I have is those bass will literally migrate like a mile inside a bay to get to where that warm water blew to. So I really put that on my radar. And, we're like 2 weeks behind last year, 3 weeks behind. So I think a lot of the difference of why I excelled, was inevitably some of the field was going off of memories. Where should we be in May? Well, you can burn a lot of time pre-fishing, days, fishing memories, or fishing how the tournament was won that time of year. And it can literally put you behind 3 days of pre-fish until you start realizing like, whoa, wait a second, none of this normal stuff is happening. I feel like I don't have the history in a lot of these tournaments to fall into that rut. So it's just simply processing with electronics for me and, kind of fishing the season. But that's where I ended up at Green Bay, was literally searching warm water. And at the end of my first official day of practice a week before the tournament, as I rolled back into the Cedar River, that was when I realized this is the warmest water on this whole 10-mile stretch here. And what happened was I had all the rods put away, and I drive back in. I tell my travel partner, Aaron Ikes, I was looking at my side scan, and there was just an epicenter of like drum and bass pods of like 3, 4, 5 bass, and then these big long marks on the bottom. And I'm like, all right, this is noteworthy, So I said, no matter what, we're not putting our rods away tomorrow afternoon or evening until we cast a couple times here. So long story short, I come out late in the morning, and I had to do some stops or whatever. And I come out, and there's like 30 boats at the landing. And I was just like, man, this area is getting pounded like this stretch, And I pull out, and the closest boat was within like a mile of the river mouth. And I literally drive to the river mouth, and I see a couple fish on my side scan. I'm like, those are walleyes. Jump up quick, hit spot lock, throw a rattle bait on, make a cast across the current, 2 rips, 5-pound smallmouth. And I said to Aaron and Chris, who were with me, I go, bass are here, walleyes are near. And they're like scrambling to grab one of my rods and hook up a lure. Next cast, couple rips, 28-inch walleye. Chris's first cast, 30-inch walleye. And I literally caught those 2 fish, like as I'm looking around, and
to find other anglers.
Yeah, just like hand in the jar of like the most precious homemade cookies you've ever eaten, you know, all three of our hands in the jar, and we're looking around. So yeah, we get out of there, and I text all my teammates, and it's like, holy smokes. So then as the week goes on, I'm like, do not be seen even slowing down there, just simply because like all you have to do is side scan it. And if there's life there, there might be, you know, if there's walleyes hiding around there, you know, it's worth fishing we don't have to confirm it. It's just worth fishing. And the more I watch boats go in and out, I realized how that first day, how human nature didn't allow me to take my rods that had all put away in their sleeves and take a lure out of the tackle box and put it on and make a cast. That's what was going to save that spot. And sure enough, there wasn't another guy who found that spot. And basically everybody in the tournament pre-fished out of that landing like 4 times in that week.
And drove right by the fish.
Drove right by them because of human nature. They're going out in the morning. It's like, I'm going to try spot A, B, and C. I'm going to cast.
So unlike what a lot of people say, the pro anglers don't always drive all the way across the body of water to catch fish.
That's true. But yes, so that
I'm
was
referring
right.
to Chad, who's with us today, who's made reference before we started.
For sure.
What did he call him?
I did not. Silly.
Yeah, silly. Silly was the word.
Of course,
yeah, silly.
Of course, those silly guys have to drive all the way across the lake, over 10 million walleyes on the way.
Yeah.
Right. So that was the funny thing. So that was, that's the river pattern. You can't fish by the dock. But, granted, that dock was 30 miles from takeoff. But it's definitely where everybody launched. So it was a pretty funny scenario at the end where, I mean, I don't want to say I finally got to be that guy who found that spot, but you hear a lot of walleye tournaments historically that have been won with something that, you consider just different, like a little different or whatever. And same lures, just that one spot was really the key.
But it was casting.
Yeah.
Casting, you were doing rattle baits.
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah, so we had 7 of our wayfish from right there.
So why is Green Bay becoming this cast mecca? I mean, obviously, and it's showing that we can do these techniques in a lot of different places. But boy, oh boy, doesn't it seem like this is the epicenter of it, man? It's Green Bay.
Yeah, for sure. I think a lot of that is the fact that there's a lot of smaller pieces of structure. So I think that's where people have really kind of gained their confidence. But I mean, I've been casting for walleyes in Minnesota, my whole life. Once I started denouncing my dad's advice of dragging a Lindy rig around for all walleyes, like there's more fun ways to catch these things. So, being a Minnesotan where we're only allowed one rod, you end up casting or fishing for them like way more often than if you can fish 3 rods, where obviously now the math says you should be trolling. So I think it's just by default that it's become kind of the epicenter.
Sure.
Where it'll work anywhere, where there is those smaller pieces of structure or whatever.
Why was Sioux so much fun? Second place. Why is that your favorite?
Oh man, that's
David Kolb ends up winning.
Yeah.
Right. You're right there.
Yeah.
But he had. Why? What was the story? It's a crazy cool place, wasn't it?
Oh man, it's the way it came together. Like the story I just told about Green Bay and how that came together, that'll give me goosebumps for the rest of my life. But the way the Sault Ste. Marie came together, so basically, long story, medium length would be, I came off of Green Bay, and it's like 0 pressure. I mean, I could take
You just
last.
won your first national event.
Yeah, I could take last at Sault Ste. Marie. That'll be fine. So it's like, I don't ever really feel pressure. But, going into that one, it was like, I'm already having the best year ever, So just whistling Dixie. And, to open my graph up and zoom out in the Sioux and not have a single waypoint. At first, I was like, well, where do we begin? Oh, this island looks nice, And it was a cool feeling. I was like, hey, starting over from scratch, And it was slowly but surely we started catching fish. But basically how it went down was I started trolling weed areas, and whether it was, down in Detour or up in Canada, the Canadian part, I was concentrating like adjacent to weeds, trolling flicker minnows. And right up till 3 hours left of practice, I knew exactly where I was going. I knew exactly what I was going to do. And I had written off this Canadian area. And so I thought about it for a little bit. I'm like, all right, let's pull the lines up. I'm going to hit the full reset button. And in that time, I started processing back. And it was actually interesting when I saw Mike Gofron kind of checking on fish that morning, that last day of practice.
Which we get it like a half a day or thereabouts.
Right, yeah, 6 hours or whatever. But I saw him casting to these weedy areas that I was purposely trying to stay away from to not snag my crankbaits on. And my wheels started turning. Well, granted, I caught 3 quality fish trolling still. But I started thinking back, and it was simply the fact that these are casting spots, these little cabbage clumps, and my wheels started turning. So an hour later, I'm like, all right, we're going to hit the reset button. We're going to go cast again. And I thought back, so we start casting a Berkeley Champ swimmer, so a 4.5-inch paddle tail.
Okay.
And I was throwing it on like a half-ounce jig to get it down to this like 12-foot cabbage. So as I'm casting it, I all of a sudden feel the dunk, and I set the hook, and a couple of nice head shakes, like 4-pound type fish, gets off. And I was like, instantly started calculating. I've only been throwing a paddle tail for an hour and a half. I've had 2 quality bites. Go another 50 feet, and I feel this little tap. And I thought about it, it's like a pike doesn't do that. The only thing it does that is like a really smart walleye. Like it ran up behind and bumped it with its mouth shut. So my next cast, I'm like, these things need to be triggered. And I thought back to this new pattern we were doing on Mille Lacs earlier in the spring, and I throw it in there, and I call it Muskie style. Literally let the thing sink down to the bottom and reel it forward, and when it contacts a strand of cabbage, just snap it like 4 feet. And I think I remember showing you the blister I had on my hand after day 1.
Oh my gosh, it was amazing.
Yeah, like the size
we don't
of
have a picture of that, do you?
No, maybe. No, not on me. Like the size of a silver dollar.
Yeah.
But basically cracking that thing out of the cabbage. And I remember I let that bait fall down the cabbage edge, and I feel the dong, like the really hard bite. And I set the hook, and before I even grabbed the reel to reel it in, I told my travel partner, I go, Aaron, this is it. I go, this is a big walleye, and this is how I can win the tournament. And he's kind of like, what do you mean? And I was so excited to reel up. It's a 7-pounder.
Oh my.
My biggest fish of practice.
Oh my.
And I was so giddy. I'm like, put the rods away. Like, we just need to find cabbage. And I'm like, this makes all the sense in the world. These things have been ambushing out of these cabbage beds to eat my crankbaits as I sneak by. They're in there the whole time. It's going to be flat, calm, and sunny. It was like just running through my head. And so we literally ran around, found all these cabbage beds, casted like 3 more times in one of them, caught a 3-pounder, and then put all the rods away officially and just looked for cabbage. So I was so jacked going into day 1.
Wait, and how far was this from
takeoff?
Yeah.
Like 30 miles.
Okay. But there's guys, I mean, where I'm going with that is that there was people talking about going 100 and what were they going to go to?
Oh, yeah. If you went to Thunder Bay, it'd be 100.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. And it was 30 miles through back channel, so wind didn't matter at all.
Oh, my.
Yeah. It was like, oh, my gosh, I'm
Game
so
on.
excited. Right.
Game
and
on.
the problem was I told my team, because we had these weed areas, but I told them, like, do this right now. Go to one of those weed beds and do it. Don't let anyone see you do it if you can, but, like, this is it. And they just didn't have time to get the confidence and, the successes or whatever of doing it. But the coolest thing was going into day 1, I was like, okay, I control and do this and, hopefully get 5 bites. And they're all tournament quality fish in the area. So 6 fish on day 1 for like 24.5 pounds. And then I think we caught like 12 of them on day 2 for 26.5.
So what's the trick? Somebody's going into that cabbage and they want to try to do this on their own. Is it just get to a cabbage edge, cast a heavy-headed jig in plastic and rip?
Yeah. I mean, once there's fish there, for sure. That's it. I think a lot of that stuff people take for granted, but those bites are so thunderous when you're doing that reaction bite.
Is it because you're stroking it so hard and it's moving fast?
No, because it's falling so fast.
Right.
So it like blasts through. That's like the commotion, and then all of a sudden this bait's like falling to the bottom. But really for me, the key is to like learn your side scan or your side imaging or whatever.
Yep.
And there's always clues that those weed beds are going to be good. When we were trolling, we were catching jumbo perch, pike, walleyes. There's just life. And it's a Great Lakes thing. If there's any one of those variables in those weed beds, because they're usually either sterile or full of life. And if they're full of life, there's walleyes in there. So I think that goes with anything, go to Mille Lacs, go to Leech Lake. You start just kind of looking for activity, and then your time is spent better,
Pockets of life.
Yeah. If you went down the entire west shore of Sucker Bay casting.
So did you learn this walleye fishing, muskie fishing? I mean, you fish for everything, right? I mean, we're talking obviously a lot about walleyes because we got connected on the tour, but
yeah.
But I mean, as many different species as you fish, is that a multi-species lesson for all of us?
Yeah. I've learned, I don't want to say everything, but I've learned almost everything from muskies. Like 10 years of fishing sun up to sundown every single day, like unbelievable amount. It's just really, it sounds dumb because not a lot of those things coincide as far as presentations.
Right.
But specific boat control, electronics, just being able to visually see how a fish reacts to what your bait is doing, like on the side of the boat. I tell a story, I've done seminars on it, where I became like 10 times better ice fisherman once I started figure eighting muskies. And the deal with that was I started understanding like how fish move in relation to your bait. So, back when I used to still think about a Lindy rig and how to jig my spoon, it's the same idea that your walleye is really subtle and, tentative.
Yeah.
And, so that's how I used to jig my spoon on Mille Lacs. When I started muskie fishing and realized how aggressive I could be with fish, now I catch every walleye I hook in the winter like 4 to 6 feet off the bottom, and I make them chase up there. So for sure, I owe a lot of like my learning from the hard knock life of muskie fishing.
And you're talking about how fish react to something. This video of yours right here is absolutely stellar. Run me through this. First of all, is this the only video of John Hoyer shirtless on the internet?
I don't know. I must have been doing push-ups there. Looks like I was still working off some winter weight. But, this is the Minnesota Metro Muskie Tournament. And I had just caught a muskie. There was about 14 fish in this weed bed, and I hadn't seen them in the morning. Caught one of them about 10 minutes before this. I'm throwing this diving rise. It rises up from like 12 feet down. What happens is I had this little weed on my lure. So you can see I'll do this little kind of half-assed like J hook. So nothing's there. And then I pull my bait out of the water. I got about 18-inch weed on there. And I look down, and this is startled. Watch, fish up from the left. I almost jump out of my shoes.
Oh, yeah, there he is.
So it zooms up, doesn't do it, and I just rip it forward, and the thing just smokes it. So in real time, that happens in like a second. But yeah, so that fish zoomed up, and it's literally like interpreting, all fish, they like to lunge at your bait. Same thing with a walleye. So as that thing's coming up, if it's not opening its mouth and flaring its gills, I'm getting away. And it's the timing of that. And that timing correlates into ice fishing, the takeaway move. It correlates into everything I'm always thinking about when I'm casting a lure for a walleye is, little scenarios like that. Picturing a fish following your lure, and then how are you triggering them? Everything that.
So
a
you're
fish
thinking about
eats,
that every time you're casting
every
these weed
cast,
beds, right?
Yeah. Everything that a fish eats, other than like bug related, stuff like, perch and bluegills, they're all chasing minnows, and every single minnow will always be getting away. So it's not something tethered on a Lindy rig and sitting there in their face.
You don't have to be so hard on live bait rigs, Maybe you should just have a shirt made that's anti.
I hate live bait.
Period.
It's actually
so you think we should go completely live bait? I'm going random here. But
I would love if it was artificial only.
That'd be fun.
Yeah.
Oh, I think it'd be an absolute hoot.
Yeah,
You talk about, if disruption grows an industry, let's disrupt.
Yeah, let's do it. Like live bait is really boring. And the other thing about it is that it sucks to keep alive. Like, oh my gosh, do I have enough ice in my cooler? Is my bedding clean? Have I changed the waters in my leeches? Do my aerator run on a battery for these minnows?
I get the whole live bait industry argument. I do. I love them. I've got good friends that are in the business, and I've got nothing but respect for them.
Right.
But from a walleye tournament side, how fun would that be?
A lot more. Well, when I say I hate live bait, there's an asterisk, but I hate keeping care of live bait. How much nicer is it if you can just roll in, pull a lure out of a tackle box and go cast it and catch a walleye? Like, that's what we want. We want sun up to sundown fishing, plug the boat in, eat something, and go to bed and do it again tomorrow. Not, are my minnows alive? Is my ice good? Am I cooler?
All these grown-up responsible things.
So maybe the shirt should say, I love artificial baits, so we don't hate on the live bait industry.
Yeah, very good.
Right.
But it definitely would change things, right?
Oh,
I mean,
yeah. I mean, I think it would force people, but inevitably, like the walleye industry right now, when you said, casting for walleyes in the Great Lakes was like spawned on Green Bay, people are taking notice. And you have to now.
But it's working in a lot. It's working in a lot of places.
Yeah,
I mean,
for sure.
I mean, you got cat. I mean, I live in north central Minnesota. That's where we're sitting now. But it works on these lakes. It works on a lot of bodies of water.
Yeah,
we just haven't pushed the envelope in walleye, right?
Right. And I think a lot of that too is the people that are pushing the envelope in electronics understanding. That's where they're becoming. I mean, I can just speak for myself. That's where I become efficient at casting on somewhere as big as Green Bay. Corey Sprangle is the one who I'll give credit for saying this. It makes all the sense in the world, though. But it's if I catch a fish and I can't figure out why that fish was there, or what it was doing there, or why that fish was there, it was useless to me. So that's what side scan has really done for all of us that have really dedicated our last 5 years of our lives into understanding that is it's a picture of the bottom. So you instantly have, like, in my mind, I'm processing 7 things for every fish catch. And now you can recreate it.
So is that a big part of your pre-fish? I mean, when you watch, I've been in a lot of anglers during a lot of pre-fish days. And it seems like the hands down number one priority is catch a fish, keep it low so nobody else sees, yeah. Right? And then make sure we get a waypoint on it so we can get back to that spot. And maybe I'm being naive, but it seems like the vast majority are just simply looking for a place to go back to. And you're trying to figure out why they're there.
Yeah, for sure. And that's really the...
How do you do that?
Well, with that number one mindset, for sure. It's detail orientated. So again, that was taught to me from muskies. Like, you don't have a choice. If you're going to be successful catching muskies, you have to be uber detail orientated. Moonrise, moonset, barometric pressure, water temperature, seasonal migration,
sun angle,
right? Lure choice, mood of fish, cold front, warm front, all that stuff. Those details seem easy to interpret in walleye fishing because there's 10,000 more walleyes per muskie. You know what I mean?
So it's a lot more catches. Right?
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So it's easily, but in that same sense, that's why those details are lost in some people's interpretation. Is because feeding windows, for instance. You catch 30 walleyes in a day. At what point did you catch your biggest ones? Was there a pattern there, or was it just the fact that you were on the spot? So we're all look at it and be like, well, it seems like we're catching a couple big ones every day at noon, then 1, then 2 o'clock. That's moon related.
So do you log all this? Or is this all in your head? This is all going on in your head?
Yeah, in my head for sure. And somebody said you should log all that, and I'm like, you know what? I'm actually anti-logging because that's how I had my success this year, not fishing any memories. But in reality, and even some of that mapping software and stuff, I barely look at my map anymore at all. But I'm glued to a full screen of side scan.
How much is technology, and how much do you think? I mean, is there anything that comes from inside? I mean, do you ever get just like a feeling? I mean, I should go over there.
I don't know. I guess I've definitely been to the point before where you're kind of like fishing by feel, like this should be the right type of thing for this season or whatever. And, or I caught one fish a couple of days ago on a spot like that, and then, okay, let's go there and try that, But no, I get pretty analytical about it, really mathematical as far as catch rate per hour in this depth with the right water temp in this walleye zone. Okay, now when is it time to experiment? I know they're in this zone. Okay, how can we do it better? This might work. So it's all just kind of a mathematical thing, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And that's, kind of just an overall strategy.
So what you're telling me is that you want to go into every body of water with a blank slate, right? So when you talking about Sue being so much fun getting to Sault Ste. Marie and turn on your electronics and not having any waypoints. So why keep any waypoints?
Well, right. I think Kevin Van Dam actually. I should read more like some of these books that are out there about tournament. But I believe that Kevin Van Dam erases either all of his waypoints, or I know he goes into it with a fresh slate. Like I've heard that from multiple people.
I don't know if I could erase them all, but I could put them over there. Right? I mean, it could get them out of the way.
Yeah, I think one of the key things is like on the rants, you can erase like certain types of waypoints.
Sure.
So, if it's your fish icon or fish catches, those are great to erase. Obviously the big boulders and the rock to sand areas, you're going to save a lot of time not having to lay those down again. So, but I would easily go into every tournament and erase every fish catch related icon.
So, let's go through the National Walleye Tour. We get to the championship. Fast forward to the bitter end. You're holding up a $97,000+ check, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we've had a career year. There are people in the Hall of Fame that haven't won 2 national walleye events in one season, and you just did that. Plus, took second at another major event. Plus, won a Muskie event. I mean, it's a career year.
Yeah.
What's going through your mind when it's all said and done? You're standing there, you're hoisting this massive check.
So that gave me a little bit of goosebumps, but only because you asked what's going through my mind, and I can think back to one very specific interview, and it was by Outdoor First Media. So Jay Sloan came and found me right after it happened, and he just puts the camera in my face and he's like, "You just won the National Walleye Tour,
right?
What's going on?" And I started talking, and instantly my brain just started going to like how happy I know my family is who watched online, who heard you announce it. How happy I'm sure they were when I took over the lead, and then I just know, like, I can feel my phone just on fire in my pocket, and it's like, that's instantly what came to my mind. But so basically I was talking about.
Are you thinking about your mom at this point?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Right.
And my aunts and my uncles. I mean, everybody was like, watching it and watching like, how could that happen? The same thing. I'm sure they were probably sitting at home going like, I knew he would do it, or I knew he could do it, or I knew he'd do well. Where I was sitting there like, yeah, right. And that was after day 1. And then after day 2, it's like, yeah, right. And then when it happened, I'm like, no, this isn't, I must still be dreaming or something, like I didn't even register. But so back to the thing, like I said to Jay in that interview, how much excitement and happiness this trophy and this season has brought to people and my friends and my family and my fans. And my brain literally stopped and said, like, you just said you had fans, dummy. Like, don't say that. And I like stumbled, and I'm like, well, I guess I've actually never even thought of them as fans, And it was like, that was my favorite part because, I got a bunch of people that commented on Facebook or whatever, or some people that said, yeah, hey, we're fans of yours, But that was like a cool thing. That's how it honestly snuck up on me. That's how all my fishing has snuck up on me. And it's still right now, like by default, I'm sure there's people that are fans of what I've done or whatever in fishing, but there will be no way I'll ever process it that way. But it was really kind of funny to see in the moment, to think about that or whatever. That was like one of the cool.
Well, 2019, for any of us that love walleye tournaments, especially big walleye tournaments, will always be the John Hoyer arrival, right? I mean, we got a little poke at him in years before, and you won a Co-Angler of the Year award, and I think you won a Co-Angler event. Detroit River?
Erie, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Detroit, Dan Steer won the pro side that event. Okay, yeah. So we had all that, but this 2019 was John Hoyer is here, and then by winning the championship, John Hoyer's not only here, John Hoyer's here to stay.
Yeah.
Right. So that's the. But I think it was the thing that it's an amazing story throughout the whole year. But you find yourself weighing in against to win your first event in Marinette with Corey Springle, that you're the guy that you were very first partnered with as a co-angler, and you get to know Corey, right? Hot angler, guy's on fire.
Yeah,
great guy. And then the final event, you're standing next to one of your buddies, Dusty Minky, right? And everybody going into that last day, I think the vast majority was like, this is Dusty's tournament. Yeah. And here you are with another really good friend sharing those moments. What's that like?
That was amazing too, and I think part of the pastor's kid upbringing, and part of my detachment from that tournament was watching my buddy have success like that. And literally right up to when you and I were standing there watching Dustin pull each fish individually out of his live well, when I first saw his 3 fish, I was like, oh man, those are kind of smaller, because I had all cookie cutter 23 inches. So he's pulling out a 21, a 22, another 22, and then he pulls out these 2 sleds
And if anybody's never watched a championship at the National Walleye Tour, what he's referring to is that it's the only day we do it all year long. We do a drive-through weigh-in. Yep. The top 10 boats come into the stage, and each angler lifts one fish at a time out, shows it to the crowd, puts it into a bag before they come up to weigh. Yeah. And I got a great job because I get to stand with the current leader and evaluate who's ever pulling fish out of the boat. And Dusty, of course, having the lead going into the last days, pulling his fish out. Right.
And then just rewind 3 minutes, you're with Tommy Kimos, who's holding the lead, who just weighed a huge bag.
Massive.
Yeah, 26 and a half or...
He's feeling really good. I can tell you that right now because I was standing next to him. He's feeling really good.
The funny thing is, as I was only ahead of Kimos by a half a pound. Well, I only weighed the smaller ones of my fish. So in my mind, I thought I had around 27 pounds. And I was kind of all right, so if he has anything less than 25, or if he's under 26 pounds or whatever, I should be good. Well, so when you were talking to him, you can hear him. He's like, oh, that's a nice one. Oh, those are pretty nice ones. Oh, yeah. And you were kind of egging him on. It was really kind of funny hearing that in the background. But so when I was up there with you and you were saying that, I was like, oh, yeah, that's a nice one. And literally that whole thing right up to when I saw he didn't have enough weight, I was like, this would be storybook. I won one. I took second. And then I took second at the championship, and Dustin Mankey won his first NWT. And I was almost a little deflated when I won. Now, that sounds, obscene, and it is, but
you guys are really tight.
Yeah.
You're really tight.
He's one of the nicest guys in the world.
Yeah.
He deserves it.
Yeah.
And the way he would have won and the way he took third was just straight, junk fishing. Something that he's really good at, just
scrapping them out.
Oh yeah, one here, one there, nothing there the next day, caught one there on the third day, stuff where he should be rewarded for his efforts. And obviously third place is an awesome finish. So when we were first and third, Kimos right in there at second, and it went down awesome.
So what's changed in the fishing world for you after this year? What was this fall like, talking to different people inside the industry? How they looked at John Hoyer a year ago was dramatically different.
Yeah. Really, I guess all the podcasts and stuff, that was really kind of fun and gratifying, having conversations, and some of them are short, some of them a little longer. So that part's really fun because, who doesn't like talking about fishing? When you started mentioning this to me, I was actually really looking forward to this is a podcast I want to do. How often do we get to talk for
not for
an
this
hour
long.
plus, right? Yeah. So, so that was one cool part about it. And then as far as, people starting to ask me about speaking engagements and, would you be available for our walleye, annual walleye meeting in Michigan? And, so that part is kind of an eye opener where it's I forget, that's the work part of my job,
But this is your business model. You got to remember, back this up. 12 months ago, you said, I'm going to make a full-time living fishing, and now it's all coming together.
Right? Yeah, for
it's
sure.
Working.
Yeah.
You feeling good? Is. You feeling good about it?
Yeah, I am for sure. It really helps that, we had a couple of those cardboard checks, which if I was working my normal schedule, before this year, I would look at that cardboard check and be like, what am I going to do with that? I'll have to make some phone calls and see what you do with an extra $100,000, $200,000 laying around because I really have no use for it, you know. But now looking forward, it's kind of like, all right, here's a budget. I need to make money doing these appearances and seminars and stuff like that, and maybe do a little ice guiding. But definitely cool changes, and it's almost annoying if somebody like starts talking to you differently because of the success you had. It's not annoying, but there's a couple like higher up people in the company who you can tell like all of a sudden they know your name for sure, which is just the nature of it. There's a lot of people that are trying to make a living in the fishing industry, and until you have those successes, I wouldn't expect anyone to know what my name is or whatever. So that part's changed.
It's not easy. National Walleye Tour, right? I mean, it's got good coverage during the event. We've got some good social media that comes out of there. I think the TV program gets to something like 162 million households or something thereabouts. I believe it was 10.2 million viewers claiming in 2019. So a lot of people watching.
Yeah.
Is that a good venue for you? I mean, does that work? Does it give you the platform to promote how you need to promote to make a living as an angler?
Yeah, I think so. Now that I have a little taste of victory and everything, and really nothing's majorly changed in my approach to fishing, I'm looking even further. I wish there was 6 tournaments a year or 8. Well, I could easily solve that if I was fishing the bass side of things, But then again, I'm insecure about my smallmouth catching ability. So, but now as it's like fishing 100%, inevitably you have to look to other ways that you can generate money. And the best way to generate money is to, the quickest way to generate money is to do well in a tournament. And inevitably after last year, if anything, it's a huge confidence boost to the fact that my process in practice and my process in a tournament can lead to success. And I think that could be like a floodgate scenario,
So why do you think you're going at these bodies of water differently than others? I mean, is it I know you spend an enormous amount of time pre-fishing, right? I mean, not pre-fishing, play fishing.
Yeah, fishing.
Yeah, you just go fun fish.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And I know a whole bunch of people that are fishing tournament circuits, bass, walleye, whatever, what have you. And they go there, they pre-fish, and then there's the event. But you're just going fishing. Do you think that makes a difference?
I think so for sure, because, again, back to some simple math. The fact that when I used to get ripped on by my professional friends that I was fun fishing, like get back to work, you're fun fishing too much, whether it's guiding or those key 3 days that I get to be with friends that I haven't, I only get to fish with them once a year. Every one of those quote unquote fun fishing days is advancement in electronics for me. And I've always, the second that something becomes predictable, it really kind of becomes work. And living by that motto has really like made me excel in fishing. It's the same thing with like electronics. Like, okay, if I can mark these fish at 7 mile, I just drove off this mud flat and I was putting it on plane and I marked these fish. Like, it's got to be walleyes because we just caught 100 of them on that mud flat. To turn around and drive over that thing at 20 and say, oh, this is what I'm looking for. Just that whole like progression and pushing forward, or the second I'm catching one on every cast, like what else can we catch them on? There's something better. So that's just from getting to fish so much. A, being that far ahead with electronics, number of hours staring at a screen of side scan, and then B, like I don't need to catch fish at all because I'm doing it so often. So when I go into practice, I don't care if I don't catch a walleye today, and I don't care if I catch 3 the one day. Not going to give me an itchy trigger finger and think I have to go catch a couple to feel right because I was just fishing for the last 3 weeks,
It's not a fishing trip. It's a fishing tournament.
Yeah, right? Yeah, this is a money thing, I'm not going there, I think not to like compare myself, and everybody has their own schedule, but at no point do I ever need to catch a walleye in practice. So I
Not a one.
No.
Because you could see them.
No. I'm just saying like, I feel like I know how I would be if I hadn't fished for a month or I hadn't fished since the last walleye tour and I show up to a body of water. I want to catch some fish. Like I would probably oversample an area or, I would keep wearing on them. You know, like I just have this. I fish so much that when it comes to getting to work, it's like pure business. It's like, what is the most advantageous thing here? Do I leave this spot right now because there's other boats around? You know, it doesn't matter to me to catch a fish. And really, that whole progression in fishing for me has turned into I'm actually having the most fun when I'm not catching anything.
So you go into a tournament, you've assembled some sort of plan. How far out does that plan go? I mean, when do you throw it out the door? So you've been play, or is it always this piece of clay that you're evolving?
Yeah, that's one thing that's kind of changed for me, and embraced. And you know, back to Corey Springle, we teamed together for that first year, and then it ended up being Bill and Dusty and I for the last 3 years, whatever. And Corey's on a working with a number of other guys, but inevitably, like to hyper analyze somebody who's literally like rewritten the book on tournament angling, and like what are all the things, like what does he eat for dinner, does he drink a beer at night? No, not during a tournament pre-fish, all those little variables. But the one thing I always took away was like how many rods that guy would have rigged going into a tournament when we were all just whacking them on spinners. We're all going to start by pulling spinners on these humps. And it was almost like at first, like, man, what are all those other things for? Because it would be hard for me to call an audible in the tournament when I have so much confidence in spinners. I'm just going to wait for these big ones to bite. But so really that's something that's changed for me, is to like go out with a rough plan and to, fish the day or whatever. To just start processing things again.
Fish the fish.
Yeah, right.
Let it flow.
Pre-fishing is like a guideline. And, I think that's something that Corey does so well. And how does it show up on your successes? Well, he's in the top 10 for Angler of the Year every year, flirting with AOI. And then he's also wins a tournament like every 5, which is unheard of.
Correct.
Yeah, nobody else does that.
Yeah, well, you're right. You're catching them quick.
Well, by default, one good year.
Well, he had. I think it was 13. I think 13 was his big one on the NWT.
When he won 2 of them?
Yeah, I think that was his start too.
So we caught up with him with that. We got that checked off. We won 2 tournaments in 1 year. So could share that with Corey. But, like that's the thing. And that's.
How do you carry all that stuff? I mean,
in the boat?
Yeah, I mean, that's a lot of gear, man. I mean, to figure out what I'm going to be doing, I'm going to be casting, trolling, rigging, but that's a lot of different stuff.
Yeah, and I love to get it whittled down. I mean, those 3 tournaments I had success in this year, I had 0 trolling rods on Green Bay. Literally went out with like 6 spinning rods. That was simple. Sault Ste. Marie, I had trolling rods that I knew I might, pull the crankbaits or spinners, but casting. And then like after day 1 at Devil's Lake, I fired all my trolling rods. So it gets a little narrowed down, but I think more importantly is, not dying in one area.
So when does John Hoyer decide to switch techniques, and when does John Hoyer decide just to switch spots? You're in a tournament, right? It's 10 o'clock. You've been doing something, and this has been working. You got hints of it during pre-fish or what have you, but maybe weather changed or what have you. But so when do you decide to go, you know what, I'm not gonna cast anymore. I'm gonna troll now. Yeah.
Well, it's tough for me to ever, like, if I'm trolling, my head's down. I can't. It's not hands-on enough. I just feel like I'm watching paint dry. I'm like thinking about casting, and it's like you drive by them, and there they are in the side imaging. You troll by them, and it's like. And they're not biting, but to go back and just like pick those 2 fish or 3
you remember
fish
there
apart.
was a day that there was no side imaging and nobody knew if they were even there.
Yeah, I know. Well, then also you could kind of drive over something a little faster and see that they were on the spot and go back and cast, but yeah, it's hard for me to be really, really confident.
I mean, does that experience, is it just, that's where I guess earlier I talked to you about gut, right? Fishing with gut.
Yeah.
And that's what part of me is asking is because it's something I personally struggle with, so I want to know. Because there's sometimes that I just feel like I got to keep pounding the same thing, and eventually I'm going to find the fish, right? We just keep going, we'll find them.
Yeah, and if you look at Great Lakes tournaments, I'm fishing for 5 bites, 6 bites, maybe 8. Like that, no matter what, that's always been that way. So one of the key things I concentrate on in practice is like, what is a good catch rate? So now we just said 5 to 8 fish. So that's a bite an hour. And that's hard for people to process. A bite an hour actually usually means 2 bites in this 1 2-hour period, and then another 2 bites 3 hours later. Like that's how it usually works, But in practice, that's another thing that I'm mathematically coming up with. And what it does is it enables me to relax and just be confident come tournament day. I didn't plan on showing up to the river mouth 6 days later, sight unseen, and whack a limit of fish in 5 casts because I caught 2 in the last 2 casts there. But I did plan on showing up and getting a feel for it and giving it some time and seeing what happens. So that whole like catch rate thing, that's really what kind of determines, do I stay, do I go, do I change? But really, ultimately we're always like looking for a pattern that you can just take to different spots in a sweet spot of an area, a stretch. So, no, it's not magic. It's not like, oh man, they were biting rattlebaits yesterday, but it's a little calmer today, and I see this water cleared up, so I'm going to throw this, paddle tail. It's still like...
Have you ever watched the morning interviews?
Yeah.
I mean, it seems like everybody's got this crystal ball, right? And that's exactly what I kind of hear sometimes, is that we can predict this stuff.
Yeah. Mine's usually a blanket statement like, well, it's going to be really windy, so we're going to probably whack them. And then it's like, oh, it's going to be flat, calm, and sunny, so we're going to probably whack them today. That's like what's going through my head. It's like, what are you going to do differently? Well, we're going to only keep bigger fish. That's what we're going to do differently today. That's how we're going to have a better weight. But,
I love the optimism.
Yeah,
though,
yeah.
Right? I mean, I really do. And I think that, so do you do any mental preparation for tournaments? I mean, I know you talk about positive attitude and the lessons that you learned from your mom and just your family in general. It tends to be a pretty positive family. I mean, do you visualize? How far do you take that getting ready for a tournament?
Yeah, I mean, as far as like visualizing, that kind of just starts happening in like practice, where you can do some work on your cell phone app, your Navionics app, and like, okay, this is 50-mile run, but until you get to Saginaw Bay, this is a 50-mile run, but like the smallest waves I've seen in the last 6 days is 5-footers, so this is actually more like a 100-mile run. Like that whole like visualizing your day and the catch rate part of it, that all kind of starts coming together. But it's definitely in the forefront of my brain. Like, what does my day look like come tournament time? Travel? Do I need to get gas? What's the best catch rate? So I definitely feel like that is a big picture thing that I like to do, and I think I'm pretty good at it. Just for the fact that, because that's always on my mind. I started practicing on an 8-hour format. When I first started fishing the National Walleye Tour, I was like, if this could be a 16-hour day, I feel like I could top 10 a lot of tournaments, because I see these guys going in early. Like, what are they going to do in what are they going to do in Oshkosh tonight for fun? Like, where are they going? There's 4 hours of daylight left. But what I do is I practice on an 8-hour format now. And that's something I started doing the last couple of years. And what it does is it really starts, putting those catch rates under a microscope, not versus caught 20 walleyes today, they're all big. How many did you catch in the evening, in the morning? To really kind of get the math down to what that tournament day is going to look like, and then what is success during a tournament day, if that makes sense.
You're kind of how do you want to say it? You're getting your expectations under control. So so when it comes tournament time, right? When the stress is on, and there's definitely a different emotion, right? When you leave a start boat, right?
Yeah.
Is that you stay calm and go, I shouldn't freak out because I've done 3 hours, right?
Yeah.
And I haven't had a bite. So that's what you're trying to manage.
Right. The weird thing though, going back to my upbringing, is I literally haven't, I don't know if the S word has ever entered my head in any fishing tournament I ever fish. Stress.
Really?
No.
Nothing?
No. I mean, I literally every single one of the
even before before your mom's battle here with cancer, it was all
no.
Even before that,
No,
it's just this is the Hoyer life lessons from Pastor Phil.
right, for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just not stressful.
Why'd they let him retire? We all want to learn from this man.
Yeah, too bad there wasn't YouTube videos of him. But I mean, literally,
there still could be.
Yeah, you're right. There could be. But literally, it's not stressful. Like the least I ever slept was after day one of Green Bay, and I just tossed and turned. But it was a functional thing. I was literally trying to decide how many hours I could spend in the mouth, and could I get a limit there? What if I tried something different? And there was just like it was just me thinking of ways like to spend time,
sure.
Different presentations. But before every other tournament, no matter what other position, boom, lights out, go to sleep. And then absolutely no stress as far as like executing or when a fish is on. It's all just this even thought process.
You're doing seminars now.
Yeah.
Do you do that seminar?
Don't be stressed.
Yeah. I would go to that seminar. I mean, seriously, from a, every seminar that's out there, everybody talks about techniques and lures, and you got to have this, and you got to work the lure that way. Nobody's talking about all the mental havoc that goes on inside of an angler's head. And trust me, I'm there, and I'm outside, right?
Yeah.
I'm not in the hype. I'm one step out of it. I'm very close to it. Mm-hmm. But you look into the eyes of a lot of these anglers, and you can see that there's all sorts of different stresses that are taking place, and some of them lash out or say things or act ways that we all know for a fact sometimes get regretted a little bit. But it's mostly competition in the heat of the moment.
Yeah, and rightfully so. I mean, that's a lot of money. And I'm just kind of looking at the way I want to know, like, I always want to kind of reverse engineer and realize, like, how I arrived at that mindset. One of it is from, like, I started fishing muskie tournaments quite a while ago. And, figure eighting a muskie in a tournament, now that is adrenaline overload. And anything less than that doesn't raise a hair on my neck at all. Like, okay, I got a big walleye on. But it's not going to change any way that I fight it, And as far as, like, the anxiety or being anxious going out before a tournament, the calming part of that for me is just like, well, you're just processing right now. Like, that's normal. But going all the way back to the pastor's kid thing, part of that seminar, yes, I actually worked on it over Christmas, and it's going to be at that Michigan Walleye thing. It's like 4 hours of seminars, but one of them is that tournament mindset. And for me, I literally just go out each time, and it's like whatever's going to happen is going to happen at the end of this day.
Nice.
And
so
it's
where are you giving this seminar? People can find that.
Small town Michigan, in between Lake Michigan and Saginaw Bay. That's some marine chocolate shop.
That is so.
It's not all great. No.
That's so tomorrow, right? We're not going to worry about that. That's tomorrow.
You can snag a bunch of this topic right now, but I mean, that's like, if you told somebody that too, they could look at you and be like, psh, and rightfully so. But that's the optimism. That's the divine intervention. Like, whatever's going to happen is going to happen at the end of the day. You're going to either have the huge bag, you might come in with 3, but it's like almost already written.
Yeah. So is that part of it? I mean, do you do like daily prayers and you turn that stuff over every day?
No, I don't turn it over. That's just deeply ingrained in my head,
Okay.
I pray at night and give thanks. And
so, like in the winning moments of these tournaments, you're going out, you think you got a shot at winning. I think there's a lot of deals getting made with people's individual gods. Right?
Yeah. I mean, mine's
I'm
simple.
guessing that there's a few. Just give me one more big one.
Please,
and
please.
This year I'll donate to Salvation Army, I promise.
I mean, literally my normal prayer is like, dear Lord, please bless my decision-making process tomorrow, and that we're safe and have fun. Like, it's just this like normal kind of monotone thing before a tournament or whatever. So I could have told you that before last year. And you're like, oh yeah, nice strategy, buddy. but and then, hey, whatever. I guess this was meant to be 2019. So,
but it's
the same mindset.
Yeah, but it isn't like you came from nowhere, right? No. If anybody looks deeper into your career as an angler, you've been doing all sorts of things on lots of different levels, and that's why I've got this enormous amount of respect for you. as an angler, and the more I've gotten to know you, I've got this incredible respect for you as a human being. But it's that whole process that I think is really cool. We're watching take shape, and you just come right up this ladder, and it's working for you, man.
Yeah, it's pretty. I mean, it's crazy when you talk like that, because you asked like what changed, and I kind of thought of another topic, but it was, as far as like my peer group, like the next bite, like Keith, Gary,
Keith, Gary, Chase, those great guys. Tom,
right? So like when I won at Green Bay or something, those guys came up and just like slapped me on the back and shook their head, like, because those guys had faith in me. When I, as a co-angler, that next year they asked me to film a show with them, and like that's why nothing's really changed in my fishing ability. It just happened to happen this year, So it's kind of fun to look back at those guys that, we know each other as anglers, and they maybe even stood up for me with a sponsor and said, watch this guy, he's going to do something. So it's cool to finally like have the success where a lot of my friends knew, like, when this guy likes to talk fishing, he's definitely observing a lot of things fishing related, but hasn't had a win yet or anything like that. So that was kind of one of the coolest parts too, is like,
why is it that we can see things sometimes in other people that we don't see in ourselves, right? I mean, you can see that somebody's going to be really good at something, and they just don't see it in themselves sometimes. That was you.
Yeah, I don't know. Just because like my whole life it was like looking up at those, like we were saying before, the PWT and the FLW, like those are just bigger than life.
Oh yeah.
And then you just kind of sneak in there, and it's like, okay, this is normal life now. And then, but winning is really hard. Man, I fished for, 3.5 years, and everybody says when it's your time, it's your time. And, then all of a sudden all that happened. And
there's people who fished a lot longer for less, right?
Right.
I mean,
yeah.
It's hard.
Yeah.
And what I don't think there's a lot of really good fishermen, right? There really is. There's an incredible core of anglers that are fishing these national competitive events, regardless of whatever species they are. But then you put the pressure of actual tournament day on there, and it's really hard to perform. Yeah. And I think that a lot of people that can stand back and look at fishing, they're like, hey, I can catch fish, right? I can catch fish on that body of water.
Yeah.
Well, it's not easy when you got money on the line. It's not easy when the competition's just down the weed line from you.
Right, for sure.
Yeah, it adds a lot.
Mm-hmm.
It adds a lot. So where's John Hoyer going from here? I mean, are you trying to get into different tournaments? Are you going to go more crappie fishing? Are you going to do more ice fishing circuit maybe? Redfish circuit maybe? Tarpon circuit maybe? Is there a tarpon circuit? Let's get one of those going.
Yeah, I don't know if there is. I think those are frowned upon, actually.
Yeah, probably.
But
you know where I'm going.
Yeah.
Because what is next?
Next, I mean, really my passion is to kind of help grow the walleye industry and, make it as cool as it should be, and, participate in podcasts like this and try to get them to circulate, share them, because if people listen to this thing and get my entire life story, if they can take one thing, like the most important thing is union carpenter for 20 years, $1,000 a week, bought a Ranger boat, started doing some guiding to pay for all my fishing, paid my bills with that. Like there's hundreds of different ways to get to the National Walleye Tour. And if that's what you're passionate about, it's not that hard.
But it doesn't have to be the Walleye Tour. It could be the Crappie Tour.
Exactly.
Follow, and I'll just go away from that. Just follow your passion.
Right.
I mean, it really comes down to passion, because I have a feeling that if John Hoyer was a name the sport, right? Whatever makes you tick, whether it was running or hang gliding or whatever.
Not hang gliding.
But you know where I'm going, right? I mean, you're a passionate guy. You'd be into it.
Right. Right. So, I mean, that's definitely one of the things that I, justify as my work on social media. Like, that is my business plan. I want to help be a part of that. And if that means growing the sport for everybody, then so be it. If that means paving the way to making walleyes as cool as bass, because all we do is cast in tournaments and it's artificial only, then so be it. Like, I want to be a part of that, because I feel like walleye fishing is that cool. They're way more wicked predator than a largemouth bass sitting in a weed bed. Like they're right like a muskie, so that part of it is one of the things. And then as far as like tournament fishing, yeah, I want to see the NWT do 6 tournaments. I want to push walleye on that aspect like as much as possible, help with that. And in the meantime, definitely start fishing like some more bass tournaments and stuff like that.
When you talk about your social media being your push, one of the coolest things I saw you do on social media was this right here, which is what? When you talk about multi-species fishing, this is it.
Well, that's okay. So even before this year happened, like Bill Shimoda and Dustin Mackey, they would laugh and they'd say, "Yeah, okay, Hoyer, but not everybody lives in fantasy world." Because
this is fantasy world.
This is fantasy world. This is my, good friend, who I originally started guiding for muskies. He happened to be very successful in the medical industry. His name's Paul. He asked me one year, at my first year on the National Walleye Tour, he asked me right before that Erie tournament if I wanted to go to Russia and Mongolia for 23 days.
And to go fishing.
To go taimen fishing, too. And then the first 8 days, we're going to be at this Russian lodge of this oligarch who's friends with Alexander Abramov, who was in the news recently, friends with Putin, to his $10 million lodge, and to fish for these taimen, which are the biggest in the world, and nobody's ever fly fished them for them.
This is the Union Carpenter fishing.
Yeah, that's him, right?
Yeah.
23 days. And that's where like Shimoda and those guys just shake their heads and say, yeah, fantasy world. So it's kind of funny to fast forward to 2019. And those are like the good graces and the things that have lined up for me in my life that just keep coming out. I'm just like, well, my dad's a Lutheran pastor, so I know he's always kind of praying for me. And yeah, this guy invited me on this 23-day fly fishing trip.
It had to be surreal.
Oh, unbelievable. Like there's no way I'll ever top that fishing adventure again, because of all the little variables, like first American group, first fly fishing group. And then this wasn't even the biggest one. This was a 63-pounder, which was basically the third biggest taimen ever caught on a fly rod. And the one I caught 2 days before that was a 69-pounder that was unofficially the biggest taimen ever caught on a fly rod. That was day one of the trip.
So where does fly fishing land in all this? We've been talking about all these. Is that your thing?
I want to do more and more. No, this was like, other than a 6-inch brook trout when I was like 18, this is the first time I ever fly fished.
Get out of here.
Yeah. But it was like fly fishing for muskies. Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Right.
Yeah.
So, but I tell you what, I mean, after I did a fly fishing in California, for striped bass, I've done a little bit more in saltwater now, like this last year. That's something that's like new to me it's fun. I mean,
I'm all in on the fly thing too. No, it's really intriguing. It's really fun.
Yeah.
And I know you're getting set to go out and see your Sims buddies in Bozeman here in a couple of days. Maybe you'll go out and do some winter trout fishing.
I wish I had another day, but then I got to go to the Berkeley Ice Summit. So, but yeah, just the simplicity of like entertaining yourself, trying to make a good fly cast.
Yeah.
It's like that takes up your time for the whole day, and then you happen to catch something here and there.
Right.
Yeah.
It's really intriguing. I think it's neat that you're as first at it as you are, and you're embracing all areas of the sport. I mean, whether it's because I know you're an avid pan fisherman too.
Yeah. It really, I looked at all that stuff, and like I said, if you follow me on social media, it could be kind of cliche, but when it's all said and done, I realize that really, like I said that just briefly, like the most fun I'm having is when I'm not catching anything.
Yep.
So it's literally just anticipating any type of catch or adventure, and it doesn't matter if it's fly fishing or, a National Walleye Tournament is probably the highest level anticipation, going into the first day. But like all that process of fishing is simply like the funnest part is just everything leading up to it, the act of it, right until you catch the fish and you know how big it is.
And you're a great storyteller. I mean, you do a really good job. John Hoyer Fishing, is it .com, right?
John Hoyer Fish is
John
on
Hoyer
Instagram.
Fish,
Yeah.
yep, and then John Hoyer Fish on Instagram. So find those because you're a great follow on Instagram. You do a fabulous job. I mean, if you aren't inspired to catch fish generally, I mean, you follow you on Instagram, you're all in. You're like, where did he get that? How did he catch this? And then you share it like, good days and bad. That's cool. That's because I love the realism of John Hoyer.
That's kind of the fun of it too, though. It's like, look at these beautiful electronics and Ranger boat, and we're on Green Bay, land of the big walleyes, and we haven't caught anything for 3 days. Like, I don't know. It's fun to share that stuff.
Well, it's part of it.
Yeah,
and it's part of makes you who you are.
Right.
So that's cool. I want to thank you. We're going to wrap this up, but I just wanted to, I got to tell you, it's a pleasure to get you here. It's an honor to be sitting across the table and conversing with you and getting to know John Hoyer better. And I'm really excited for where this past year that you've had. I am so excited about where you're going and the things that I think you're potentially could accomplish in John Hoyer's career. And it couldn't happen to a nicer guy. You're a wonderful man, and all the best to Ann and Pastor Phil and the rest of your family.
Thank you.
It's pretty special to have you here, man.
They are going to be at the Green Bay tournament next year.
Wonderful.
So the Mary Zelmer, which is my aunt,
yes,
and Ann Hoyer, they think your energy you bring on stage, like they are literally your number one fan. So they both live in Florida, and they're like so excited when you and I get to converse on stage, you know. So they're really looking forward to it. I'm like, oh yeah, I can probably line up a handshake with Chip after the tournament. So they're going to be at our Green Bay tournament. It'll be fun to get everybody together. Wonderful.
Yeah. No, that's pretty neat. That's pretty special. I look forward to that. I look forward to meeting him in person. That'll be great. All right, thanks.
Thank you.
Chip Leer. Wildside. Don't miss a single Wildside podcast. Subscribe to the Chip Leer's Wildside Podcast YouTube channel today or visit fishingthewildside.net.